Use headphones for best experience.
If I do not write this now, the voice beneath Waldegrave will finish learning my name. Read this before the village buries the truth again. I, Edmund Winslow, being of sound body but frail mind, hereby set down my account of the events of the night of October 13, 1907 in the village of Coldwater. I do this in trembling earnest, knowing well that my words may meet with disbelief or mockery. Yet I must record what I witnessed, before the last tatters of my sanity desert me, and before the encroaching darkness upon my soul finally claims it. Ambrose Montague, my closest companion for a decade, was a man of brilliant mind and unyielding obsession, whose fervor sometimes frightened me as much as it inspired me. After our mentor, Professor Goddard, died, Ambrose inherited a trove of forbidden diaries and antiquarian books. One slim ledger in particular, written in ciphered Latin, consumed him for months. Late one autumn evening, his eyes alight with triumph and dread, Ambrose revealed what he had deciphered: a secret door beneath the old meeting house cemetery, a passage into some hidden vault older than the colony itself. I felt a chill as he spoke. We both knew the grim local legends of that overgrown graveyard. The village vicar had warned us in our youth that the ancient Waldegrave crypt at the wood's edge was sealed for good reason, its occupant rumored to traffic with unholy forces. Such warnings echoed in my mind, but Ambrose was resolute. He dismissed the old superstitions and swore we owed it to Goddard's memory to investigate. Nothing I said would dissuade him, and loyalty, or perhaps morbid curiosity, compelled me to follow. And so, on a moonless night under whipping autumn winds, we set out to unearth that dreadful secret. Past midnight, we crept through the woods toward the old burial ground, carrying a dark lantern, a coil of rope, and a field telephone apparatus Ambrose had procured. Hardly a word passed between us. My heart was pounding loud enough for both. Fallen leaves and pine needles muffled our footfalls as we followed the overgrown path by memory and feeble starlight. At last, the trees thinned, and we reached the iron gate of the deserted cemetery. An ancient oak loomed beside it like a silent guardian. Beyond lay tilted headstones wrapped in moss and bramble. No crickets chirped, no owls hooted. It was as if the night itself held its breath. Across the weedy expanse, at the edge of the woods, stood the squat stone mausoleum we sought, the Waldegrave crypt. Its arched oak door was bound in rusted iron and half buried in vines. We scaled the creaking gate and approached that lightless tomb, our lantern casting distorted shadows on the engraved door. Ambrose paused a moment, resting a trembling hand on the cold iron handle. Even then, he half turned to me and murmured that I could wait outside if I preferred. I shook my head. We had come too far to turn back. Without further delay, we forced the crypt door. A few hard strikes with the crowbar shattered the rusted padlock and chain. The hinges groaned as we heaved the door open. A puff of foul, long, stagnant air exhaled from the darkness within, carrying the cloying scent of damp rot. Lantern held high, Ambrose stepped inside, and I followed close at his heels. The mausoleum's interior was a single stone chamber barely 10 feet across. At its center stood a raised sarcophagus of dark stone. The air was frigid and thick with mildew. We circled the sarcophagus, our lantern light revealing its heavy lid carved with a worn family crest. Ambrose's determination brooked no delay. He motioned for me to help push the slab aside. I swallowed my protests at this desecration and lent my strength. With a grinding scrape, the lid slid and toppled to the floor, cracking in two. The sound echoed unnaturally, as if in a much larger space below. Inside lay a crumbling skeleton in tattered finery, the mortal remains of Abijah Waldegrave himself. I averted my gaze, but Ambrose was undeterred. Gently brushing bones aside, he probed the coffin's interior. His fingers found a seam in the stone bottom. With a grunt, he pried up a hidden panel, and a second, more fetid gust of air burst forth. Beneath the false bottom was a narrow shaft, and the first steps of a stairway spiraling down into the earth. We traded astonished glances. A faint current of colder air wafted up from that lightless throat in the ground, carrying a distant, almost human sigh that raised every hair on my neck. Ambrose's eyes gleamed in the lantern glow. He clipped the telephone wire to his belt and thrust one handset into my hand. "I'll head down first," he whispered, trying and failing to keep his voice steady. "You stay here and keep watch with the phone. If I'm not back shortly, you can follow." He forced a thin smile that I could not return. Every instinct screamed at me to accompany him immediately, but at last I nodded. This had been our plan. One man below, one above to secure an escape. In theory, it made sense, though it felt maddening to let him go alone. Without further argument, Ambrose squeezed himself through the narrow opening and began to descend, lantern in one hand. His figure and flickering light soon vanished around a bend in the stone staircase. I was left alone in the crypt, the telephone receiver clutched in my sweating palm. My own lantern's glow cast quivering shapes on the damp stone walls as I strained to hear any sound from below. Each minute of silence gnawed at my nerves. I had to resist the urge to flee into the night, or descend recklessly after him into that throat of darkness. The darkness beneath the coffin yawned like an open maw, and for a moment I was overcome by the terrifying notion that the vault itself was somehow alive and hungry. At last a crackle sounded in the earpiece, followed by Ambrose's hushed voice. "I'm at the bottom," he reported. "There's a passage here, a tunnel of sorts. The air is foul, but there's space to move. The walls, my God, the walls are covered in carvings, some kind of strange symbols, curving and intertwining, nothing I recognize." His voice was distorted by static, but I could hear the mix of awe and unease. I crouched by the open sarcophagus, cord taut between us. "Be careful," I whispered into the mouthpiece, heart pounding. "Describe what you see." Even as I asked, I dreaded the answer. "The tunnel slopes downward," Ambrose continued softly. "The floor is damp. I'm going deeper in. The odor, it's getting stronger, like sulfur mixed with decay." He coughed, and I heard him gag. There was a long pause that made me grip the phone tighter. I could only imagine him venturing further away, lantern trembling in one hand and telephone in the other, utterly surrounded by darkness. Abruptly his voice came again, more animated. "There's some kind of doorway ahead, a great stone slab blocking the passage. It's covered in inscriptions. This must be the inner vault," he was whispering rapidly now. "I feel a draft from behind it." The ledger spoke of an incantation to open the way. A spike of alarm pierced me. "Ambrose, wait!" I hissed urgently. "Are you sure it's safe?" My plea went unheeded. Through the static, I heard him begin to murmur strange words, the start of some chant. His voice echoed oddly, as if he stood in a vast hall rather than a cramped tunnel. The sounds he uttered were a mix of Latin and harsher syllables that made my skin crawl. With each phrase, a low vibration ran through the earth and a queasy pressure mounted in my ears. Suddenly, there came a rumble of grinding stone over the line. Ambrose gave a breathless laugh of astonishment. "It's opening," he panted. I exhaled in relief. Briefly. For scarcely a heartbeat later, his tone shifted to one of utter confusion and growing terror. "There's light, a glow from inside. Oh, merciful heaven!" His words broke off, replaced by a strangled cry. "What is it, Ambrose? What do you see?" I begged into the telephone, voice cracking. There was no answer, only a wet, shuffling noise and a bizarre chorus of low murmurs in the background. Then I heard Ambrose scream, a sound of primal fear that cut me to the core. "Go back! Get out, Edmund!" he shrieked, before his voice was drowned by a ghastly, bubbling howl of agony. The line went dead, silent but for faint static. "Ambrose! Ambrose!" I yelled into the receiver, my shout echoing in the crypt. No reply. A cold dread seized me, but I refused to abandon him. I snatched up our spare lantern and tied the end of the rope to a stout stone projection. Without further hesitation, I descended into that black hole, calling Ambrose's name into the darkness below. The steep steps led me down into a narrow passage carved through earth and bedrock. My lantern light quivered on glistening walls, etched with the same alien symbols Ambrose had described. The air was almost unbreathable, choked with a mix of damp loam and putrescence. A deep silence swallowed the sounds of my footsteps. About 20 feet down, the staircase leveled out into a tunnel. Here I found Ambrose's dropped lantern guttering on the ground, its glass cracked. I picked it up and pressed on. A few yards beyond, the passage opened into a vast cavernous space. My feeble lantern flame could not probe its full extent. Slick stone floors stretched ahead into darkness, interrupted by toppled pillars and heaps of rubble and bone. The walls that I could see were dripping with moisture and blotched by patches of phosphorescent lichen, which cast a faint green glow like corpse light. The stench of decay was overpowering. I fought the urge to retch as I crept forward. Somewhere in the gloom, water dripped steadily, the echoes making it sound like furtive footfalls. To my left, I noticed a massive stone slab door set into the chamber wall, slid aside along grooves in the floor. Ambrose had succeeded in opening the vault. A short distance from it lay his leather satchel, torn open, its contents, notes, and the torn ledger page scattered across the wet stone. I saw the thin telephone wire trailing from the satchel, disappearing into a yawning alcove beyond the door. A chill ran through me at the sight. Whatever had happened, Ambrose had reached this chamber, and something else had as well. My shaking voice called out, "Ambrose!" But only my own voice came back to me in a mocking echo. I had the dreadful impression of unseen eyes observing me from that impenetrable dark. As I listened, a soft scraping sound came from somewhere to my right, behind a fallen pillar. I stepped toward it, raising the lantern. "Ambrose, is that you?" I whispered. I rounded the pillar and found him. Ambrose sat slumped against the stone, his head bowed. At first glance, he appeared miraculously unhurt. He even seemed to be breathing. Relief flooded me as I knelt beside him. "Ambrose, thank God!" I cried, grasping his shoulder. In the sickly light, I saw his face was deathly pale, his eyes open but vacant, pupils wide and unseeing. A faint moan escaped his lips, a monotonous drone, as if he were insensate. Dread prickled through me. I gently shook him, trying to rouse him from whatever stupor or seizure held him. Suddenly, a harsh, bubbling chuckle issued from his throat, an awful sound that no sane mind could conjure. Before I could recoil, Ambrose's hand shot out and clamped around my wrist with unnatural strength. I gasped in pain and shock. His eyes rolled upward, fixing on me at last. But I trembled, for I recognized nothing of my friend in that gaze. His mouth twitched into a gruesome grin. In a gurgling, strangled voice not wholly his own, he rasped two words. "Not Ambrose." A wave of primal terror washed over me. With a desperate wrench, I tore free from his grasp and stumbled back. Ambrose, or the thing controlling him, let out a shrill, inhuman shriek that echoed off the cavern walls. I turned and ran blindly toward the tunnel, wild fear lending me speed. Behind me, I heard a scuttling, scraping pursuit, and that awful choking laughter. The lantern's light gyrated madly as I flew across the chamber. Somehow I found the passage and lunged into it. I half climbed, half scrambled up the winding stairs, each breath a sob. As I hauled myself through the open sarcophagus above, my shoulder struck the propped coffin lid. With a thunderous crash, the heavy slab toppled back into place over the opening, sealing off the stairway. I heard a thud and a screech from below as the lid slammed down, then silence. I did not hesitate. I fled from that mausoleum into the pre-dawn darkness, stumbling through briars and headstones, until the cursed graveyard and its unseen horrors were far behind. I cannot recall how I made it back to town. My next memory is of gray morning light and the concerned faces of villagers who found me babbling and hysterical by the roadside. I told my story, but no one believed me. A search party that day found the Waldegrave crypt door standing open, but inside, everything was undisturbed. The sarcophagus lay sealed and intact, with no sign of any hidden stairway. Of Ambrose Montague there was no trace. In the days since, some have called me mad. Others whisper that I must have murdered my friend and hidden his body. Perhaps you, too, will dismiss my tale. In truth, I can hardly believe it myself. Yet I would welcome any fate over the nightmare reality I have witnessed. Still, I know what I witnessed. The knowledge of it burrows in my mind like a malignant worm. Each night I wake in terror, imagining I still hear that hideous chuckle resounding in the darkness. I write this final statement as both confession and warning. My folly has cost me my dearest friend and shattered any peace of mind I had left. Some secrets are not meant for the minds of men. Seek not what lies buried in ancient tombs and lightless caverns. Such knowledge cannot be forgotten once unearthed, and it will devour your soul as it did Ambrose's. I will never forget the last sound I heard as I fled that place. In the silent hush before sunrise, from somewhere deep beneath the cold earth, I heard a voice echo up from that black pit. It called my name in a sing-song whisper. The voice was distorted, wet, and gurgling, yet I recognized whose throat it came from. It was Ambrose's voice, and at the same time, it was something else entirely. I swear on my soul, whatever spoke from that darkness was not Ambrose.
If you enjoyed this video, please do not forget to like, comment, or share this video with your friends. Subscribe to our channel to hear more stories like this one.